in the context of crypto and what we're comparing it to, it's starting to veer towards that direction. So basically the news was that Helium is burning 100% of the Helium Mobile MVNO's revenue. So before this announcement, HNT was burned when you basically use the Helium network or the Helium Mobile service that's just called Helium Mobile, and it's run by Nova Labs, which created the Helium Deepin. They've launched, in the last year, a mobile subscription plan. And before that, they would only burn HNT similar to AT&T, just like when they used the Helium network. What they've now committed to, which is very big news, is burning 100% of the revenue that they're bringing in from subscribers. So what that means is if you're paying $30 a month for the unlimited Helium Mobile plan, all of that revenue is used to burn HNT.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Shoot the Shit Pod number 12. I'm your host, Matthew Nane. I'm joined here by the Enterprise team. We have Patrick, Chris, Dylan, and Sam. Today is August 25th, and we have a loaded agenda. We're going to talk about a little bit macro, maybe a Fed pivot, ETH all-time high, Hyperliquid unit volume going through the roof, DeSci and Bio heating up, prediction markets might be back, a little deep in corner, and always we're going to finish up with what we're doing on chain. So if we look over in equity land, on the month, the S&P is about up 1.3%, flirting with all-time highs. NASDAQ up 1%, gold up just under 1%. We look over in crypto on the month. ETH is up 23%, Solana up 5.5%, Bitcoin down 4%, and Hype up 5%, with most of this performance coming within the last week and a half. So we had a Fed meeting last week where the Fed chair came out a little more dovish than expectations. And so everything kind of shot up over the weekend, got a huge liquidation event. So what are we seeing from the majors and also from equities? What are you guys seeing? Where are we in the cycle? And what do you think we go from here?
I mean, I think the Jackson Hole, everything that was said during that, I think it was, everyone was positioned increasingly hawkish, I think, going into that. So like everyone was like pretty much set on like, we're definitely going to get like 2 rate cuts, right? Like we're going to get like a significant amount of rates cut over this course of the year. And then Jerome kind of came out and said like, hey, we think that jobs are more of an, like they take precedence over inflation. So we're going to basically keep the 2% target that we have. And clearly the market took that very dovishly. I think that a lot of people, like there was a structural positioning, I think, in a lot of TradFi going into that people had to protect their downside. Because if you were caught off sides on that and you like got blown out on your longs or something like that, you had a fund, like that's pretty much like a fireable offense. So people had to be protecting. There was like structural protection against that. So the market was clearly kind of like ready to spring back up at any sort of dovish news. And I think that's exactly what we saw. Like, those remarks were made immediately, like the Q shot up, like S&P shot up, all of crypto shot up like crazy. So I think like it was really this structural pressure in the system that was released when those comments came out. And I think it's, it bodes well. I think that Q4 is going to be pretty solid in stocks. And I think that's going to spill over to crypto a bit. I mean, I was a bit bearish on crypto maybe like 2 weeks ago, but I think with this being said and kind of like looking forward into the next quarter for stocks, I mean, I think that's just going to drag up Bitcoin with it, kind of regardless of where we're at in the crypto cycle itself.
I guess we also saw the some of the ETH treasury vehicles, right? They've started to slow down, but we also saw like Bitmine acquire another 200,000 ETH today. They're at 1.7 total ETH, worth just shy of 8 billion. Are the alts going to be led by just these DATs and everything, or are we going to start seeing other versions of flow come on chain? Or is it really just going to be led by who can get on CNBC and shout the loudest to buy their asset? Or are we going to see some retail coming back as everyone sees like retail isn't here yet and retail's poor from getting burned in the Solana trenches and stuff? So what are you guys' thoughts there? Do you think it's going to be just DAT led, or are we going to start seeing some like more natural flows come on chain as this cycle progresses, as we think we keep going higher from here?
I mean, I'm of the opinion that retail has been here. Like I think obviously, like everything with pumped up fund and all the meme coin trading, like you look at Google Trends for Phantom and it's like absolutely peaking in, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th week of July. And same with Hyperliquid, right? Like those searches are peaking. And I think if you look at some of these coins that are retail driven, like you look at HBAR, you look at, XRP, like they're pretty high, right? Like they're up significantly off of their bear market lows. So I do think that retail has been here, but I think the best way of getting new retail in is always price go up. So price goes up, someone who's had the Coinbase app downloaded for a couple of years sees, oh, ETH is making a new all-time high. Maybe I should check in on my portfolio, right? They see their ETH at all-time high, and either they, I guess, decide to sell or they decide to come in and pay more attention and start buying new stuff. I think like with the DAT question, I think it's a lot of structural buy pressure in the system, and that's why I was a little bit bearish earlier, because I kind of thought that, the market itself is looking weak from the participants, but there's a structural buy pressure that's masking that. And I still think that's the case to a certain extent. I think that, like Tom Lee's going to push up Ethereum, like all these new DATs are going to come in and buy the assets. But what's underneath that from the actual market outside of DATs, it's a little bit less sure. I think that probably on this last move, there were people that were sidelined going into this and have just been hoarding cash or kind of like waiting to see how this shakes out, that are now getting back into the game, who are crypto native. And I think that those flows can be significant, definitely. And I think those flows are the flows that are going to push up something like Hyperliquid, right? And they're going to start seeing like assets that don't have like super strong DATs like Ethereum and Bitcoin and Sol now start to run. But yeah, I mean, that's my take on it. I think we can have an alt season that's just driven by sideline flows and some new participation coming in, but definitely the structural bid on ETH and Sol is going to push that up much higher.
I think one of the things to watch is how easily absorbed the Solana DAT is, like any issuance from that. Yeah, I guess you can make the argument that this most recent run from like 180 to 210-ish was maybe us pricing in the DAT. But like you can look at the Sol Bitcoin chart, you can look at the Sol ETH chart. Like clearly Sol has been lagging in this most recent leg of the market or of the cycle. And so I think that if there's not a bid for Sol, it might just be indicative of like we've like gone too far down the risk curve for DATs, and there really isn't a bid outside ETH and Bitcoin. And Average Joe's Crypto, our fearless leader, also made the interesting point that it might just be a lot of rotational capital. Like we saw that Bitcoin whale this weekend on Hyperliquid, swapping out Bitcoin to buy ETH. I think that there's probably a lot of cases where it's just no new capital really entering crypto. Just people moving from Bitcoin to other more long tail assets.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting point that Joe brought up here. And the Hyperliquid activity is some tangible evidence where minus that, I would be skeptical of, how we could confirm the theory that, okay, Bitcoin capital, Bitcoin whales, whether that's institutions or individuals, are rotating into ETH. But if you're seeing that activity happen on chain through Hyperliquid, I think it is indicative that it could be happening on a broader scale through centralized exchanges. So that's one thing. On the Solana side, that is pretty interesting. I'm keen to see how that will perform. Bitcoin and ETH are the two big ones that I think we've seen TradFi sell pretty effectively at this point. But I think Solana could be that third one where maybe the more longer tail assets, whether that's Athena or otherwise, I think those are harder sells as very risk on, crypto tokens with lockups and different aspects like that. I think Solana could be this third one that could actually catch a bid from some new capital.
The thing is, like, it depends on how much TradFi is willing to dive into the rabbit hole. Because I think, like, just from me talking to some of my friends, like, the way that probably 99% of TradFi views it is like Bitcoin is its own asset, and then ETH is a bet on DeFi. And they don't really know the difference between like ETH and Sol that much, right? So like, I think obviously Tom Lee going on TV and like shouting from the rooftops about like 100K ETH, like help people get on board and could at least see like, oh, there's a ton of bullish energy around this, so let me buy it, right? But I don't know if the actual like fundamentals and things that we're looking at will impact buying all that much. So there probably needs to be someone in the Sol camp going on TV and saying like $1 million Sol. And then people will be like, oh, okay, cool. Let's get in and get a part of this.
Yeah, I agree. I think the like advocacy has been super helpful for getting ETH mainstream. Like, I mean, ETF flows just took so long to catch on. And for us to think that like we could, I mean, maybe we'll just enter like some super like liquid era with rates coming down where people just go like, fully on chain, fully risk on, and then Sol looks a lot more attractive. But in this environment, I don't know. It's hard for me to get in the camp that it's gonna put in a candle like ETH has the past couple of weeks.
I think one good thing though is that Sol has been ranging for quite a while through the all-time highs and then back down to whatever the lows were, hundreds, somewhere in the hundreds. So that has been a pretty long period of consolidation, long enough, I think, where if there is some positive price action and new flows, I think that could push it up to outside of this range where it's been ranging for a little while here.
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting, especially because I think we're getting the face that Solana has been needed, and we're getting a Tom Lee-like, especially with Galaxy Jump and Multicoin joining in on this $1 billion treasury initiative to kind of get that face. And it doesn't help that you just had the Yeezy launch right around this when we're trying to change the narrative on Solana, which we could touch on if we want. But yeah, we brought up the Hyperliquid unit volumes and so some stats over the weekend. We saw officially $1 billion TVL on unit with the spot volume over on Hyperliquid. There was a 24 all-time high of 3.4 billion on the platform. And if you look at just the recent 24 hours from today, we have just shy of $1 billion on ETH, 750 million on Bitcoin, 300 million on Hype. So what does this show for like where we've gotten from in today in 2025 compared to 3, 4, 5 years ago from just what we're able to do on chain, and how I don't want to hype up unit too much, but like how awesome of a product, and like just what does this show for like where we've come from, like dexes to sexes, and then also just the visibility, transparency, we're able to see all of this happen on chain. And what do you guys think of this? Is this gonna like you said with a rotation, is this just more of a rotation game, or is this just more people getting onboarded to unit and Hyperliquid in general?
I think the unit buys these past few days have been like probably the most interesting thing going on chain. To see like an ancient Bitcoin whale wallet wake up and choose Hyperliquid to like swap out of Bitcoin is just so interesting. It's definitely indicative of like how I think people on like the outside of like this on-chain ecosystem are viewing Hyperliquid. Like it is the cheapest place to make a swap at that size. This guy was doing 9-figure swaps, which is absolutely insane. So yeah, it's cool. I mean, I think that they hit nearly 4 billion in volume over the weekend, which is pretty incredible to see them manage that without any sort of like downtime or like execution errors or like poor performance. Like it sounds like it just went super smoothly. So that, I mean, to see us like handling that much volume in 2025 is definitely cool. And again, like it's just indicative of like how far we've come in the past few years. And, like I think we've all been pretty bullish on Hyperliquid vocally over the past like year or so. But it seems like it's they've really cemented themselves as just a place where you can, like reliably do swaps at the largest possible size.
Yeah, so Friday and Saturday both had about $2 billion in spot volume, and then Sunday was over 3 billion. So the Friday and Saturday were both all-time highs, and then Sunday just blew it out of the water. And we've seen the perp dex side of things that's already found product market fit. We're seeing it eat into centralized shares of perp dex volume, and that's only continuing. And now I think this is some form of validation on the spot side as well. Like we've been seeing unit grow, but just the amount of activity over this past weekend, I think just solidifies that argument. And we're seeing that in the price action of Hype as well. Everything is down today, whereas Hype is positive. So the market is definitely taking notice of the weekend's activity there.
Yeah. And just as like a comparison, 24-hour volume on August 23rd for Bitcoin spot was higher on Hyperliquid than Coinbase and Bybit combined. So I think shout out to Unit for handling that so flawlessly. It's and also for the buybacks. I mean, to see them contribute 100% of fees to buying back Hype, it's just it's clear where their alignment is. It's cool to see that.
I guess a little speculation of that. Could those buybacks change if/when there is a unit token? Does anybody have any knowledge there? Is there any confirmation there? What's going on with the Hyper EVM and like the the people onboarding into Hyper EVM and airdrop hunting versus just like good products, so we're going to use it?
Yeah, nothing's been confirmed yet as far as like a unit token. I mean, clearly, like it would launch at a very nice valuation if they're bringing in millions of dollars in fees a day if this keeps up. But yeah, it's I don't know. We will see. But the Hyper EVM is definitely, I think it's going to start looking a little bit more interesting with the HIP3 markets. For anyone who doesn't know, HIP3 is permissionless perps market listing. So anybody can stake a million hype, which is approximately 44 million US dollars, and you can permissionlessly enter the auction to launch a perps market. I think it'll create like a lot more interesting opportunity on the Hyper EVM for projects that participate. They can launch any sort of market they want, pre-IPO, IPO stock indices. They could do commodities. I think, yeah, I'm excited to see how this like changes the dynamic. I'm excited to see the role that Kinetic plays. They have $1 billion in hype TVL that could be lent out to like 20 plus projects at current prices to make HIP3 markets. So the role that they play should be pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, the most interesting part about Hyper EVM DeFi is that there's that hyper core aspect. So even if it's just a lending protocol or a liquid staking protocol, there's very interesting things that you're able to do with the interplay between those two networks. And yeah, HIP3 is something I'm super excited for as well. Ventuals is one that's trying to bring pre-IPO markets to Hyperliquid, but there's a lot of other opportunities as well. Like Sam mentioned, prediction markets is one as well. There's a hackathon going on right now. I was chatting with one of the folks building there, and he's interested in building a prediction market. So the possibilities are pretty open there, and I think it'll provide a lot of opportunities for users as well to get involved, not only on the trading side, but something like Kinetic, right? Being able to have a stake or some kind of revenue share with the creators of these markets. And I think that's the next frontier for Hyperliquid, where you've already seen success on the perp and spot side, and this is kind of a net new thing that's more uncertain, but everyone in the Hyperliquid ecosystem is very bullish on the potential there.
Yeah, you kind of touched into like a nice little segue into the question: Are prediction markets back? We've seen some strong performance from Flipper, up almost 500%. Now it's only a $15 million market cap, but it's Flipper is basically where you can go and play with Polymarket leverage and basically bet on yes, no outcomes with leverage. So has anybody used the product? I think you're able to go and just be able to at the bot on Twitter and be able to use it and say, hey, go yes, long 5x leverage or whatever. So what do you guys think about this new primitive in prediction markets? Or is this going to actually get some use case, or are we just going to think this is fun, nice little trading activity, cool to get leverage, but like no one's going to be able to use it? Or is this a new primitive in prediction markets in general?
Well, I'd say one of the core constraining factors to prediction markets are just most of the liquidity pools, available liquidity to trade, are very small. So you can only deploy limited capital. It's usually only the most notable in the zeitgeist political events or elections that have large pools that you could deploy a lot of capital into. It could be a sports betting market where you're just betting on the Cubs versus the Cardinals. But there's obviously a lot of opportunity to sports bet already, so people want to have more ability to trade on some of these smaller events that are political or business related, but might not be getting a lot of attention. So if you can increase the amount of leverage that traders can take, this will, I think, lead to more people entering into these smaller markets. And I think the social integration, especially with Flipper with X, and I think Kalshi is planning or has already implemented some kind of social layer integration of X as well. I think that will do a lot to also magnify these markets. Like, I think just being able to easily tap a button while you're just scrolling, be like, this is the position I'm taking. I think that is, just probably like the best UX you can get right now for prediction markets. And I think it is a smooth, like seamless transition. So I think things only go up from here. Kalshi hired a head of crypto, I think today or in the last few days. I'm seeing tons of posts on X, just how do you do arbitrage trading on Polymarket or prediction markets, where what are some dozens of applications being built for prediction markets. I think there's a lot of increasing attention, and I think as alpha starts to go down in meme coin markets and crypto, and people start to look to what's the next big thing, I could see prediction markets being a wide open opportunity, especially with leverage trading and more volume and more markets where people can actually gain meaningful alpha. I think at this early stage where there's not a lot of quants and proprietary models that are getting into a lot of these markets. So overall, I think prediction markets are well positioned, and I think tokens associated with prediction markets are going to get increasing mind share in the coming months.
Do you guys know what kind of activity has been going through Flipper? Is it pretty notable, or haven't looked into it?
From what I could tell is really just price has gone up. I know some people have tried to use the bot like on X, and it hasn't really worked, but I think the narrative is there, right? You also see Robinhood getting into prediction markets. You also see DraftKings trying to get into it, Kalshi trying to get more on chain. And so I think it's more narrative driven right now, but it'd be interesting in a couple of weeks to see what actual performance has been from people using the product. And I have to start looking into it and using it as well. But
I also think there's a very large opportunity for prediction market influencers to gain a very large audience rapidly if they're able to just leverage these, on-chain bots once Flipper starts working. The opportunity's there. I don't know who wins. I'm guessing it's going to be a combination of who can beat right the most and has some level of alpha, and then those who can just entertain based off how they're trading prediction markets or just integrate it into their broader political commentary or just persona, where they're just throwing money on a view they have. So I think that's also something to look towards. There might be like a creator economy tie-in too with some of these emerging prediction market influencers. I think we'll see a lot of overlapping apps and use cases start to come in with prediction markets and creating a really cool product that we've just never seen.
Looking at the Polymarket volumes, activity has been super consistent throughout the whole year and the tail end of last year after the U.S. election. About $100 million in open interest every week. And interesting tidbit, in recent weeks, the election portion of the open interest has started to rise, where it was basically non-existent for most of the year. So we're seeing the Polymarket thesis play out, and it's going to be a key player for elections in the future for sure.
Definitely, yeah. Everyone could go and place their bets for the 2028 nominations and elections. Even though we just had the election, everyone could go and start bidding there. I want to kick it over to Chris. You can take a victory lap if you want to, as Bio is up 237% on the month. I know you wrote a report about it a little while ago, and it's sitting at $343 million market cap right now as we speak. And so for everyone that did not read his report, which definitely you should go do after this call and learn more about Bio, but Chris can catch up to speed. But basically it's a DeSci launchpad, a DeSci financial layer. So Chris, you could talk about a little bit more and what was what happened? Where's the growth, and what are you looking within the product and kind of looking into some of these raises or tokens on the platform?
Yeah, so I'm always a little bit hesitant to take a lap on anything DeSci related because we've been faked out a few times about the narrative. But so Bio basically since last March has been iterating around with their launchpad. So short kind of like history of Bio was they spun out of Molecule, which is like a kind of like raising for specific research. And they started off as more of an incubator. So they were incubating bio DAOs, taking them through like a 16-week program. They give them like $100,000, and then they would get in exchange for like a portion of their token supply. So that was like super hands-on and, obviously very operationally expensive and not very scalable. So in March, their V1 came out, which was the first iteration on the Launchpad, where basically they just made selection for who gets launched permissionless. So anyone could apply, like bio DAOs could come on and apply for funding. And basically you could delegate your bio to a certain bio DAO that you think should get funding. And then the funding round would happen after that. So there's kind of like a delegation round, then a funding round. It was on a bonding curve. And then once the funding was over, if they reached the target, they would be launched onto a DEX with bio as the denominator. So to me, like that was already a huge step in the right direction for a couple different reasons. And I think one of the main reasons was it kicked off two flywheels. So you have the tokenomics flywheel, which is very similar to virtuals, very similar to Zora, where you just denominate in the token. So you kind of have this reflexivity when bio goes up. The pools that are paired with bio also go up. And in addition to the tokenomics one, you also have a fee-based flywheel, which is very similar to, like, for example, Launchcoin. So post-funding, the way that these bio DAOs would get continued funding was actually through trading fees. So bio protocol would take a portion of the fee for the liquidity that they provided, and then the rest of it would go to the bio DAOs themselves. So more trading, more funding for the bio DAOs. And you kind of have this cycle where you have attention from launches, and then those launches draw people into the platform. Those people speculate. The fees go back to the bio DAOs. And then you have more speculation coming in when new bio DAOs launches. And in the ideal world, you get higher quality bio DAO launches as it goes on, because someone who's looking for funding, say they maybe just got their NIH funding cut, and they're like, damn, how am I going to fund this research I'm doing? They might come in and see, oh, well, these other bio DAOs just got a ton of money from trading volume. Let me go launch on this launchpad as well. So those two flywheels were kicked off. And it also introduced the beginning of agents. So basically in science right now, the way that AI is intersecting with it, a really interesting component of it is multi-agent systems. So you see some of the big Web2 companies launching these kind of multi-agent systems for science. So Google, for example, they have AI co-scientists. And what this does is it can cut down the time in the research project pretty substantially. So you're going through kind of like your typical, like, generating a hypothesis, doing research. Well, if you can offload a lot of that to a multi-agent system, you might take a, say, like year-long process, 2 years long, 3 years long, and condense that down to just a few weeks or a few months in the ideal world. And eventually these agent systems are going to be able to handle the entire process. So like once they really scale into robotics and you get really intelligent systems that don't need much of a human in the loop, you can basically have these agents generating hypotheses on their own, then sending off this hypothesis to a wet lab to get tested, going through trials that way, and then being able to go to a clinical trial. And like this will literally save like hundreds of millions of dollars, like honestly up to billions of dollars in scientific research, because right now it's really extensive, the amount of time and the amount of money that have to go into these things. So with the BioV1, they were introducing bioagents as these agents that are built with the ELIZA framework that have the ability to help researchers out along their research journey, basically like getting to a hypothesis that is testable. And they weren't positioned as tokens themselves at the time. So they weren't thinking about tokenizing the bioagents. Basically, the way they were thinking about it would be you could stake bio and run one of these agents. And then when someone uses your agent, you would then accrue the fees that they would pay to use the agent. And they would have a fleet of agents that people could tap into and do research with. V2, they decided to tokenize these agents. So they're taking like a very similar approach to virtuals. So they're collaborating with some really great scientists right now, like Aubrey de Grey. He's a leading scientist on longevity. They created a bioagent that has some proprietary research of his baked into it. And so now people can use the bioagent. The bioagent accrues fees and has its own token. So people can invest in the bioagent itself instead of just investing in BioDAOs. So the big unlock here is really that when you diversify the assets like this, you get an asset of these agents that has a quicker feedback loop for the market to be able to process information. Because with BioDAOs and then also IPTs, which are basically like tokens for specific research, they're all research-based, which means you might not see the actual value accrual of the things for like 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And it's really hard when we're in an industry where like the feedback loop's really quick and you kind of have this like hot ball of money rotation always happening between sectors. So if you're locked into a BioDAO or an IPT, you're waiting a couple of years. That's like a massive opportunity cost in this market with like highly, like volatile assets, high turnover and different narratives. But the bioagents make it so that you can invest in something that actually gets like immediate information back. So like, what's the usage on this agent? Are they generating good hypotheses that can then be minted into their own kind of like research tokens, IPTs? Is it contributing good knowledge to the knowledge graph, which is like a DKJ origin trail, basically like a knowledge graph, which is like kind of a database for science. They're creating like an open one. So there's multiple ways for these agents to actually accrue value. And when investors can get this like real-time information, it can allow them to make better decisions. So much more investable from that angle, probably the most investable like asset or vehicle for investment that we've seen in DeSci so far. So I think just that can bring in a lot of new flows. But then when you combine the agents, so you have this like kind of high velocity information asset with the other assets, which are more research driven, long-term assets, you get this ecosystem where you can really take like a diversified, nuanced approach to the strategy of your portfolio. So I think like as someone who's coming in and looking to delegate money to this ecosystem, you can go and say like, okay, maybe I'm really bullish on this bio agent because they have some sort of proprietary information. I'm going to invest in them because I think that they're going to be able to generate a lot of really interesting hypotheses. And then you might have another agent who maybe you're not as bullish on them for like quick hypotheses, but you're like, they've generated some really interesting research and I want to invest directly in this research. So then you might invest in an IPT. And then maybe there's a BioDAO who you're like, okay, I really like the way that they're managing their money. They're investing into really interesting stuff. There's some cool research coming out of here. I'm going to delegate to them for more of like a broad exposure to the area of research that they're into. And with BioV2, all of these assets are paired with Bio, and all of them feed back into the Bio flywheel. So when a new asset's launched, all the trading fees, they accrue back to the DAO, and then part of it accrues to Bio. You get the tokenomics flywheel. So if Bio goes up, all of these projects within the liquidity pools also go up. And it's all contributing to bringing more people into the ecosystem. So I view this as very bullish for A, Bio, and then B, very bullish for DeSci more generally, because I think it's a super under-researched and super under-invested sector. And it makes sense because, like, again, if you historically look at it, there's a lot of opportunity cost in investing in it. So I think that we're going to see a lot more flows go into the ecosystem. And because right now, it's only like 0.2% of crypto's overall market cap. It's something like super, super small. So with all this opportunity for new flows to come in, I'm like really bullish on everything coming out of the Bio ecosystem. And then just generally more broadly, like people's attitude towards DeSci changing a little bit. So as I said, like I've been juked out with these in the past, like these DeSci narratives, but I think this is the best opportunity we have to see an extended DeSci narrative and really catch some momentum here.
I think that's super exciting. I hope it works out because we've seen the whole flywheel play out for something like AI, where you had this hype cycle and then there's still a lot of builders left from the remains of that cycle. So something similar could happen for DeSci, and that'd be cool. I have a couple questions for you, Chris. Do you have any sense on the BioDAO side what types of research or products some of the more prominent BioDAOs are looking to solve? Because like you said, there's a long life cycle for doing research, getting a patent, ultimately productizing and seeing the fruits of your labor. So the skeptic in me and probably many others would challenge that this is a viable route for like a very long term process like this. So yeah, like what types of BioDAOs are out there? Are they long-term oriented? Are there some short-term ones?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like different BioDAOs take different approaches to generating value. So some of them are more into commercializing products that are like more consumer driven. So for example, like HairDAO has some consumer products that are out, and they have some patents on those as well. So those are more like kind of direct, easy routes to it versus like a really long-term scientific like endeavor. But if you look at BioDAO like VitaDAO, so they've been around for the longest, and they actually have some like, nine-figure licensing deal with like a very prominent biotech company or pharmaceutical company. So there's a lot of progress being made. And again, like I think they're in like stage 1 clinical or stage 2 clinical with that. But you have like these kind of bigger projects that they're taking on. And then also like, okay, how do we generate kind of immediate value accrual? Can we actually just get a consumer product out to market? There's been a lot of progress in a couple BioDAOs that I'm really interested in. So one is Curetopia, which is super interesting. It's this guy, Ethan Perlson. He's like ex-Harvard PhD, and he's interested in curing rare diseases. So Curetopia cures rare diseases. And he has a lot of experience in the field, and they've been making some promising strides in the right direction with that. Also, SpineDAO is kind of interesting. They're looking to basically use AI integrated into spinal research and like spinal surgeries. So they've been partnering with a lot of really interesting people within that field. I'm trying to think of a couple other ones. There's some ones that are like a little bit more niche, like for example, SciDAO, they're focused on like psychedelics, which again, like definitely an interesting research topic, but maybe not as like appealing to the general public, I guess, because it's kind of niche, like the people that are into psychedelics. But again, like there's been a ton of research in that area. Like there's a ton of clinical trials going on with like MDMA, mushrooms, ketamine. So there's a lot of progress being made, and I can definitely like send you over personally more stuff that that's been happening, some blog posts and stuff. I can't think of all of it off the top of my head, but I think that's the interesting thing of like, this is just catching on now in DeSci because we have like, again, like these investment vehicles like agents, which there's a lot of attention, there's a lot of speculative energy around this, but these BioDAOs, some of these BioDAOs have been working on this for over 2 years. So I think there's a lot that has gone uncovered or like underdiscovered by the market so far. That's actually really interesting progress that's being made. And I hope that all of this speculative energy that's now going into the agent launches, at least a portion of it, does a little bit more research into what's been going on over the past 2 years with Bio and sees, okay, DeSci isn't just this meme, right? Like there's real research being done. There's like PhDs from very well-respected institutions coming on board this and saying, hey, we like this as a means of funding. And I think there's this perfect storm going on right now where all the progress from the past 2 years is converging with a period of time where funding is really hard to get. There's been a ton of cuts in the NIH. Researchers are struggling to get the funding that they need. And like historically, some of the most impactful breakthroughs that we've had have come from teams that were underfunded, and it almost didn't happen. So like, for example, COVID, like the vaccine that we have, like the mRNA one, that lab actually was super underfunded and almost had to end up getting shut down. So there's a lot of labs that are doing really interesting stuff and just don't have the funding, and now might turn to something like DeSci to be able to get the funding that they need to continue their research.
One final question for you on this. Have you seen any BioDAOs lean more into like a meme coin type of branding, where I could imagine someone, a personality like that of Unicorn Fart Dust, some like boomer professor or even some Gen X young person just creating a meme coin and saying, hey, here's a meme coin, here's what I'm doing, and let's try to generate some activity here and fund some of the research that I'm doing.
Yeah, so there's a couple different I guess like angles or avenues people are incorporating kind of like that meme coin energy and culture into it. So first off, there's Pump.Science, which is a launch pad that launches basically like different molecules for testing. So they're actually very legit, and they got a lot of shit. We had this kind of like little DeSci narrative back in December, and people were like, oh, what is this? This is crazy, whatever. Like the tokens aren't connected to research results and stuff, which I do get. And like BioProtocol actually addresses that in a lot of ways with like funding being attached to milestones. But their whole idea is like, it's kind of this competition where you have two different molecules. I think one was like ribo something and then like euro something with the first two. And they use these compounds to do studies on like mice and flies. And then eventually they can work it up to like human clinical trials. And you can invest in these like coins that are kind of meme coins. And, like the price performs sort of with like how, like ideally the speculative energy gets converted into like what the results are from these tests. And you can see the tests happening in real time. So they have a camera that shows like all these flies, all these worms. And you can see like they have different, metrics on how effective it is. So there's kind of like this interesting meme gamification thing going on in that realm. And then you have the BioDAOs that are maybe like a little bit more lighthearted in terms of like how they're, I guess, branding themselves. So you have one that's coming out now, which is DickDAO, which is focused on like men's health and like, erectile dysfunction, those things. Like obviously if you're calling yourself DickDAO, you're kind of like leaning into that energy a little bit. And then you have just pure DeSci meme coins. So for example, what's that one called? Pythia is a DeSci meme coin that is created by this lab that has a mouse that they're like doing, basically like the mouse has a chip in its head and they're using AI to get signals from the mouse in terms of like what it's thinking at the time. So they'll like say something or like give some sort of incentive and the mouse will like click yes or no. And they're able to like backtrack that into like how he's thinking about things at the time. It's like a super wild thing, but this guy's like a very well-known scientist in Russia. So they've created a meme coin that has like literally no relation to like how any of the tests are going or whatever. It's just like Pythia coin. And they're taking that and running with it. And like their sense of humor is pretty good about it and stuff too. So there's kind of like, there's a wide spectrum of how people are incorporating memes into it.
All right, Matt, I think that's enough science for today.
I think so too.
Yeah. That was enough of science corner. I was going to ask though, for the actual like infrastructure side, are they chain agnostic or are they focusing on a certain chain?
They're on 3 chains right now. So the token itself is on Base, Solana, and Ethereum. And the raises that they're doing right now are on base.
Okay.
And I think part of, just really quickly, like part of the rationale behind that too is because of the Coinbase integration with DEXs. So through the Base app, like anything on Base can be traded by anyone who has Coinbase. So I think that's a little bit of the thought process behind that, is new launches can be instantly traded that way.
No, you read my mind. That was kind of the segue I was going to get into about like just the Base app integration and kind of segueing you that, because we saw Bernard Saga over the weekend tweet about Balaji's creator coin on Zora, and then also with Airdrome up almost 50% on the month, Morpho almost up 30%, Zora up 37%. Do we see this continuing with just price and then also just all the other metrics up and to the right as this Base app comes out, as the Coinbase integrations come out? Like, are they going to be able to make some of these projects in the Base ecosystem, and what are your thoughts there for just like as a Coinbase user? Is this going to lead more to, are people going to get stuck in the Coinbase app? Because I think a natural life cycle of someone coming into the ecosystem just as like a retail user or someone that's interested, they download the Coinbase app, can't really do much stuff of on chain, or is this just going to get more people in the weeds and bring more people on chain because they say, oh wow, somehow Coinbase is showing that I'm using Morpho and stuff like that. So curious what your guys' thoughts there with like the Coinbase integration and just bringing Coinbase into more of a superpower app and bringing more people on chain.
Yeah, I can start. I think Coinbase has made it clear that they're trying to become one of the everything apps. And I think from their perspective, they're betting that most users are just going to stay on Coinbase for the most part. There'll only be users who really get into certain apps that might move off chain, but they'll still likely be pretty integrated into Coinbase as a whole. So it's not a huge loss if there's some slippage of usage. So I think the idea is just offer the best trading experience possible. When we put Coinbase alongside Hyperliquid and Robinhood, for example, are also seemingly trying to become everything apps. I think the default is just capture as much attention, offer as much as possible in one place. That'll create network effects in one way or another. And I think most users will probably just stay in Coinbase because of the integrated experience that they're creating. And, I'm sure this will not be negative for on-chain usage at all. And it might lead to some level of adoption, but I think the majority of activity for the foreseeable future will still be concentrated in Coinbase and similar apps. I know Sam has a big take on this too.
Yeah, I mean they've done a fantastic job taking the approach of like, let's verticalize everything and own it ourselves. I don't necessarily think that like that is the only way to win. I think that like you can take the more modular approach and succeed as well. But I'm excited to be a Base app user. I'm hoping it's like a lot of fun. It's like a really like easy mobile on-chain experience, because I haven't really seen anybody crush it with mobile yet. That might also just be because people don't want to trade on their phones. I think that that's an okay answer too. Like when you're moving money around, sometimes it's better to do it on computer where you can't really like just fat finger something. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I guess if there's no thoughts over there or on that, we can pivot over to Deep End Corner. Dylan, you had a great tweet over the weekend. You said it's time to go Buffett mode. So Helium is now burning all of the Helium Mobile revenue that they have. They're averaging around just shy of 50,000 data credits per day. That's roughly $17-18 million per year if you annualize it. So how we haven't really seen that in price, with H&T still really lagging the announcement. But like, what does this mean for Helium? What does this mean for H&T? And why were you really excited for this announcement?
Yeah, so my view is that this presents one of the most compelling investment opportunities in crypto, where I think the fundamentals are approaching a level with H&T where like even like a TradFi, like Warren Buffett fundamental value investor type person would be, open to looking at the case for H&T. That's not to say that Helium is a value investment by any means, but from the context of crypto and what we're comparing it to, it's starting to veer towards that direction. So basically the news was that Helium is burning 100% of the Helium Mobile MVNO's revenue. So right now, HNT is only burned when you use, or before this announcement, HNT was burned when you basically use the Helium network. So if you connect it to a hotspot, whether that's through the offload program in AT&T and their user just using a Helium hotspot or nearby, HNT would be burned in that case, or the Helium mobile service that's just called Helium Mobile, and it's run by Nova Labs, which created the Helium Deepin. They've launched, in the last year, a mobile subscription plan. And before that, they would only burn HNT similar to AT&T, just like when they used the Helium network. What they've now committed to, which is very big news, is burning 100% of the revenue that they're bringing in from subscribers. So what that means is if you're paying $30 a month for the unlimited Helium mobile plan, all of that revenue is used to burn HNT. So what this would do, according to our calculations, is up to 9x revenue or 9x HNT burns, which is the value accrual on HNT holders based on the Helium Mobile's MVNO revenue. What we're seeing on chain so far is about a 3 to 4x. So maybe revenues declined a bit, or they're just timing how they're going to burn. There's not a lot of like full transparency into what the actual revenue is, but they're just telling us that they're burning. And, on-chain burns have 3, 4, 5x now. So clearly that's a lot of revenue. And yeah, basically we're seeing 5x value accrual to HNT from a mobile service that's growing probably 50 to 100% plus a year. And yet we haven't seen any impact on price. So this news, this 5x in actual value creation, has not moved markets. Now this could be for various reasons. Some people say there's just whales. You have a sell wall at 270, and that's just why price isn't going up. But if we also look at like Messari's mindshare mapping and functionality, like you'll see like Helium's mindshare is not going up. If anything, it's going down. While like maybe the greatest value creation event outside the major DeFi protocols in all of crypto has occurred. And to summarize, my view is that there's no actual good arguments for why Helium shouldn't be going up. Everything I hear is just like outdated takes based on previous models of Helium, or just a complete misunderstanding of how Helium works, which shows that investors, those with capital, don't actually understand what's happening today with Helium and the market. And that means they're not pricing in what's happening, and that the market is probably not efficient, and that this underlying confusion and lack of clarity about how Helium works is just causing no impact on the market. And from a reasonable investor standpoint, this might create a opportunity, not financial advice. So yeah, that's the story of Helium. I think like there are caveats, like there's no like legal commitment for Nova Labs to continue burning the revenue. We don't actually know what the revenue is for Helium Mobile. So like anything could change at any time. And that might be priced in. But I think if you know the team and you know what they're trying to accomplish, I think it's unlikely that they stop. And I think the market just doesn't know what's going on anymore. And they've just stopped paying attention to HNT because there's been so many changes. And it's a very confusing, complex model compared to the rest of crypto. So yeah, that's what's going on there. I don't know if there'll be a short-term impact, but I think if the Helium mobile service continues to grow and revenue just keeps, going up by multiples, I think eventually the market will have to say something's happening here, and we have to actually understand why Helium's growing is gaining all this revenue, and that's what we're waiting.
Dylan, what are the biggest criticisms people have here?
The biggest criticism is usually just not understanding what's happening. So it'll be like, oh, they have this complex multi-token framework, which they used to have, but they abandoned in January. Or it's not even understanding that there's a MVNO, that there's a Helium mobile service, and assuming it's still the IoT Helium. So they just haven't put in any effort into understanding where Helium is at today. So yeah, I think the main criticisms don't really have anything to do with the reality of Helium. And then I'd say the more valid criticisms are not even being vocalized. So can Helium continue to scale their supply side? Can they, for the Helium mobile MVNO, can they basically use enough Helium hotspots where you don't have to pay a 5x rate on the fallback T-Mobile service if they don't have coverage. So like, can they incentivize enough Helium hotspots to be deployed in high value locations, usually cities, where Helium Mobile can be a scalable, economically sustainable model? It's like, that's a valid criticism and concern, or at least concern. But that's not even really being talked about on Twitter, for example. I think like, you could say like, is there any real commitment to burning this revenue? It doesn't fully make sense that they can burn all their revenue because they have OpEx, they have costs. We don't fully know if they're burning from the treasury, if they're buying and burning. So there's some like questions about why they're doing 100%, because that's not economically sustainable, years on out. But I think there's likely to be burns in the short run, and there's just no reaction or even like effort to see what's really
so it's basically like misunderstandings around Helium's like core business model and what they do, and then also maybe a little bit of uncertainty around the revenue burns.
That's exactly right.
Gotcha.
Yep. No, definitely a great announcement nonetheless, and looking to see that perform in price, and definitely bullish the Helium team as we work closely with them. So we can wrap it up with what we're doing on chain. I'll just go around the horn as I see it on my screen. So Sam, what are you doing on chain?
Nothing much right now. I don't know. Market's kind of slow. I had some money in perps, was losing that, took it out, sitting and waiting for confirmation on which way we go next. But I want to try out prediction market trading, especially if we get some like downtime. I feel like that could be a fun skill to learn, like Dylan was talking about earlier.
Yeah. This past weekend off chain, I was in Tokyo for an Arbitrum event, so I didn't have much time this week to do things on chain. But before that, was playing around on Pendle, particularly on the Hyper EVM side, doing some LPing for some of the Hyper EVM projects, Kinetic, Hyperbeat. Also bought some Kinetic YTs, speculating a little bit there. And then also on the Ethereum side, doing a little bit with Athena's Converge chain and Terminal, which is a DEX coming up there. Other than that, Say had a big token launch in about a month or so ago, Dragon Swap, the DRG token. They airdropped a small 0.5% allocation, but the token has been performing pretty well, and I'm doing some DeFi summer type activities there of just providing liquidity, farming some emissions, and then posted on Zora for the first time. Got $2 in trading volume on my post, which was pretty cool to see. And last thing, looking forward to trying out Ventuals here on testnet. So going to do that later this week.
Sweet. Chris, what are we doing on chain? Are you just trench coat or the lab coat only? Or are you doing some other stuff?
Yeah, I'm lab coding. I did invest in the new agent sale today, which was super oversubscribed. So a lot of bullish energy around that. Besides that, I'm not doing too much. I'm trading a little bit of perps just for fun. But yeah, just those two things.
Dylan, what are you doing on chain?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, prediction markets, I think, are really entering the zeitgeist in terms of mind share. So I've been experimenting with a bunch of prediction markets, seeing where there's opportunities at. Maybe you'll be hearing more about that, maybe not. And yeah, just general on-chain activities, which I'll not disclose, but I'm very
not
bullish
disclose.
Yeah, we're still.
What are you doing on chain, man?
We're still waiting for the creator coin thesis that we're waiting to see. It's out?
It's out.
Okay.
It's out. I haven't published it on Twitter, but
yeah, go read
check it out
that.
at
Wait for
Messari.
his thread and learn about Taylor Swift coin.
And it's an enterprise report, so if we saw that 50% deal off,
Exactly.
now's a good time.
Looking forward to some more
advantage of that.
reports from Sam and Patrick, who just joined the team. For me, what I'm doing on chain, I'm still waiting for my Seeker. Ridiculous. It's been almost 3 weeks till I've gotten that. Excited for play Solana Game Boy, playing around, a little bit the trenches heating up, airdrop farming over on Hyperliquid, losing money. So that's fun. But this has been a great episode of Shoot the Shit Pod number 12. Looking forward to getting back in your inboxes in a couple weeks from now. Do all the usual stuff. Like, subscribe, follow wherever we're at. Go check us out at Messari.io. Go follow us on Twitter. And as always, this is not financial advice. Do your own research, which some of that research can be done on Messari by reading these guys' great reports. And thank you all for listening. Have a great rest of your week.